Sarah Mitchell's footsteps echoed through the sterile corridors of St. Mary's Hospital. Step, drag, step, drag. The irregular rhythm had become as much a part of her as breathing. 3 years since she'd hung up her Navy flight suit. 3 years since she'd traded the chaos of combat zones for the supposed peace of rural Virginia. And still, that damn limp followed her everywhere. Click thump, click thump. She could feel the stairs, always the stairs. The morning had started like any other Thursday. Sarah arrived at 6 a.m., an hour before her shift, because getting ready took longer now. Her right leg, the one that had been shattered by shrapnel from an RPG in the Hindu Kush Mountains, required careful stretching, medication, and mental preparation before she could make it through a 12-hour shift. The physical therapist said it would never fully heal. The VA doctor said she was lucky to have kept it at all. Lucky, right? "Morning, Sarah," Nurse Jessica Chen chirped as she passed, her voice dripping with that particular kind of pity that made Sarah's jaw clench. Jessica was 26, fresh-faced, with 2 working legs and no idea what it meant to carry ghosts. "Morning," Sarah muttered back, not breaking stride. The ER was unusually quiet at 7 a.m. The calm before the storm, the veterans called it. Sarah checked her station, organized her supplies with military precision, everything in its place, everything ready. Old habits died hard. In combat medicine, being 2 seconds faster finding a tourniquet meant the difference between a soldier going home and a family getting a folded flag. Then at 7:43 a.m. all hell broke loose. "Mass casualty incoming," the charge nurse's voice crackled over the intercom. "Multi-vehicle accident on Interstate 95. We've got 18 victims en route, multiple critical." The ER exploded into controlled chaos. Nurses ran in every direction. Doctors shouted orders. The trauma bays were prepped in under 90 seconds. Sarah moved toward Trauma 1, her station, her zone, when a hand gripped her shoulder. "Sarah, a word." Dr. Richard Chen, the new hospital administrator, stood behind her. 45 years old, Harvard-educated, and utterly convinced of his own brilliance. He'd been at St. Mary's for only 6 weeks, but he'd already made it clear he believed in efficiency and optimization. Sarah had heard him complain about her medical restrictions, her slower pace, her accommodations. "Dr. Chen, we have incoming casualties." "Exactly." His eyes dropped to her leg with barely concealed disgust. "Which is why I need the most capable nurses on the floor. Step aside, Sarah. Let the younger staff handle this." The words hit like a physical blow. Around them, the ER continued its frantic preparation. Nurses who were her juniors, people she'd trained, for God's sake, rushed past carrying equipment. They averted their eyes, embarrassed witnesses to her humiliation. "I'm a trauma nurse," Sarah said, her voice deadly calm despite the rage building in her chest. "I've handled mass casualties that would." "In a hospital setting with proper support, perhaps." Dr. Chen's smile was patronizing, the kind reserved for children and incompetence. "But this is different. We need speed. We need nurses who won't slow down the team. You understand, don't you? It's not personal. It's about patient outcomes." Not personal. The phrase echoed in her mind with bitter irony. Sarah wanted to scream, wanted to tell him about the 43 combat evacuations she'd flown, about the time she kept a Marine alive for 52 minutes with her hand, literally holding his severed artery closed while their helicopter took enemy fire, about the silver star gathering dust in her closet, earned by pulling 12 wounded soldiers from a burning Black Hawk seconds before it exploded. But she didn't. Because what was the point? He saw the limp, the slower gait, the 42-year-old woman who flinched at loud noises. He didn't see Angel 6, the call sign she'd earned in blood and fire. He couldn't see past the broken exterior to the warrior underneath. "Step aside, Sarah, that's an order." Her hands clenched into fists. The scars on her palms, burns from that last rescue, stretched tight. Around them, Younger nurses shot her pitying glances as they rushed toward the trauma bays. Jessica whispered something to another nurse, and they both looked at Sarah with that awful mixture of sympathy and relief that they weren't her. Sarah stepped back. The ambulances started arriving. She watched from the sidelines as the ER descended into beautiful, terrible chaos. A 17-year-old girl with a crushed pelvis, a middle-aged man with a steering column through his chest, a young mother screaming for her children. The kind of carnage Sarah had seen 100 times before in places whose names she still couldn't say without tasting copper. She knew exactly what each patient needed, could see the mistakes in real time, the intern fumbling with an IV line, the nurse applying pressure in the wrong place, the doctor wasting precious seconds on a secondary injury while missing the real threat. Her leg throbbed, her hands trembled with suppressed adrenaline. Every instinct screamed at her to move, to act, to do what she was trained for. But she stood there useless, pushed aside, forgotten. Dr. Chen passed by, barking orders, playing commander. He didn't even glance her direction. Sarah limped toward the supply room, needing space, needing air, needing anything but the pitying stares and the suffocating feeling of being invisible. She'd survived Taliban ambushes, had stared down death a dozen times, had earned the respect of Marines and Navy SEALs alike. And here in a civilian hospital in rural Virginia, she was nothing, just the broken nurse who couldn't keep up. She leaned against the supply shelves, fighting back tears of pure rage and shame when she heard it. A sound that made her blood run cold. Thump, 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 thump. Helicopter rotors, close, too close. And not just one. Her head snapped up, old instincts flaring to life. That wasn't a medical helicopter. That was military, heavy transport, multiple birds. The building began to shake. Something was very, very wrong. The first explosion of sound shattered every window on the eastern side of St. Mary's Hospital. Not an explosion, rotors. Massive, earth-shaking helicopter rotors that made the building's foundation vibrate like a tuning fork. Sarah's combat instincts kicked in before her conscious mind caught up. She was moving toward the sound, pushing through the supply room door when the screaming started. Patients in the waiting room shrieked and dove under chairs. Staff members stood frozen, staring upward in disbelief. Through the large glass entrance, Sarah saw something that shouldn't exist in rural Virginia. 4 CH-53E Super Stallions, the Marine Corps' largest helicopters, were descending on the hospital parking lot like mechanical birds of prey. Jesus Christ, someone whispered behind her. The lead helicopter touched down first, its massive tires crushing a row of parked cars. The rotor wash was biblical, a hurricane of force that sent loose debris, papers, and small objects flying like missiles. Car alarms screamed. Trees bent nearly horizontal. The other 3 birds followed in perfect formation, creating a scene that belonged in a war zone, not a civilian hospital. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Her hands went automatically to her sides, reaching for gear that wasn't there anymore. No tactical vest, no radio, no sidearm, just scrubs and a name tag that said Sarah Mitchell, RN. But those helicopters knew better. The rear ramps dropped before the rotors even finished their cycle. Marines poured out, not walked, not jogged, poured out in full combat posture. 12 from the first bird, weapons at low ready, moving with the fluid precision of operators who'd done this 1,000 times. They wore desert digital camouflage, plate carriers loaded with gear, and faces that could have been carved from granite. "Everybody stay calm," the lead Marine's voice boomed over the chaos. "This is not an attack. Remain where you are." Dr. Chen burst through the ER doors, his face transitioning from confused to purple with rage in approximately 2 seconds. "What the hell is going on? This is a hospital. You can't just..." The gunnery sergeant leading the Marines closed the distance to Chen in 4 massive strides. He was 6'4", built like a brick wall with a face that had seen too many hard miles. A thick scar ran from his left eye to his jawline. His name tape read, Morrison. Sir, the word was respectful but carried the weight of absolute authority. Gunnery Sergeant James Morrison, 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force. We need to speak with whoever's in charge. Right now. I'm in charge, Chen sputtered, trying to pull himself to full height, which still left him half a foot shorter than the gunny. And I'm calling the police. You're trespassing on private property, you're terrorizing patients, and We need Angel 6. Morrison's voice cut through Chen's tirade like a blade through butter. The ER fell silent. Even the car alarm seemed to pause. Chen blinked. Angel what? Listen, I don't know what kind of code name nonsense you military types. Angel 6, Morrison roared, his parade ground voice rattling the remaining intact windows. We were told she works at this hospital. We need her now. Behind Morrison, the other Marines had formed a defensive perimeter around the helicopters. More were unloading from the other birds, crew chiefs, corpsmen, even what looked like a field surgeon based on the gear. This wasn't a show of force. This was a medical evacuation team. Something catastrophic had happened. Sarah pressed herself against the wall, trying to stay invisible. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Angel 6. Nobody had called her that in 3 years. Nobody in this hospital even knew that name. She'd buried it along with her flight suit, her medals, and the nightmares that came with them. There's no one here by that name, Chen insisted, his voice climbing an octave. Now I'm ordering you to. Gunny, a younger Marine, a sergeant, approached with a tablet. I've got her personnel file. Sarah Mitchell, age 42, Navy veteran, former flight nurse. Assigned to HMM 268, Afghanistan 2019 to 2022. Call sign Angel 6. Last known employment, St. Mary's Hospital, Virginia. He looked up. This is the right place. Morrison's eyes swept the ER like a searchlight. Nurses, doctors, patients, all frozen in place. Which one of you is Sarah Mitchell? Silence. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She could walk away, could stay hidden, could let them search and eventually leave. She wasn't Angel 6 anymore. That woman died in a burning helicopter over the Hindu Kush. Nobody? Morrison's voice dropped to something dangerous. Fine, we'll go room by room if we have to. We've got 18 Marines bleeding out at Quantico. Every second we waste here is a life we lose. He turned to his team. Split up, find her. Wait, Dr. Chen held up his hands. Just wait, what's going on? What happened at Quantico? Morrison's jaw worked like he was chewing gravel. When he spoke, there was something broken beneath the warrior exterior. Training accident, Major 1. IED simulation went wrong, building collapsed, we've got chemical exposure and… He paused, closing his eyes briefly. And some rounds went live when they shouldn't have. Our field hospital is drowning. We've got 18 critical casualties and not enough hands to save them all. Then take them to Walter Reed, or… No time. Morrison slammed his fist against the wall, leaving a dent in the drywall. Walter Reed's 40 minutes out. Our boys will die in transit. Quantico's hospital is overwhelmed. We sent 3 birds there already, but we need more expertise. We need the best. His voice cracked slightly. We need Angel 6. She saved more combat casualties than any nurse in modern military history. If anyone can keep our Marines alive long enough to get them to definitive care, it's her. Sarah felt the weight of every eye in the room, even though they didn't know where to look. Her leg throbbed. Her hands shook. Every part of her screamed to run, to hide, to stay buried. Sir, a soft voice from behind Morrison, a young corpsman, couldn't be more than 22, stepped forward. His eyes were red. My brother's one of the casualties. Lance Corporal James Chen. Sucking chest wound they gave him. They said maybe 20 minutes when we left. His voice broke. Please, if Angel 6 is here, if she can help, please. Chen, same last name as the doctor. Sarah saw Dr. Chen's face drain of color. That's my nephew, Chen whispered. James enlisted last year. He's stationed at Quantico. Morrison's scarred face softened just slightly. Then you understand, sir. We need Angel 6. She's his best chance. From her position against the wall, hidden behind a medication cart, Sarah Mitchell closed her eyes. Her hands were shaking so badly now she had to grip her own wrists to steady them. PTSD flashbacks crashed over her. The screaming, the blood, the faces of the ones she couldn't save. But also, the faces of the ones she did save. The 19-year-old who got to go home to his baby daughter. The staff sergeant who walked his daughter down the aisle 2 years later. The 43 souls who were alive because she'd refused to quit. She thought of that young corpsman's brother. 19 minutes left, maybe less now. Sucking chest wound meant tension pneumothorax. Without immediate intervention, decompression, chest tube, surgical repair, he'd suffocate on his own collapsed lung. She'd done that procedure 100 times, could do it blindfolded, could do it under fire. But I'm not that person anymore, she thought desperately. Angel 6 died. I'm just Sarah now, broken Sarah, limping Sarah, Sarah who gets told to step aside. Nobody? Morrison's voice was hollow now, defeated. Fine, we'll try Walter Reed and we'll pray it's enough. He keyed his radio. All units mount up, we're. Wait. The word came out barely above a whisper, but in the silence of the ER, it rang like a bell. Sarah stepped out from behind the medication cart. Morrison's head snapped toward her. His eyes went wide, then dropped to her leg, the limp, the slight drag of her right foot, then back to her face. Recognition dawned like sunrise. Ma'am, his voice was suddenly reverent, are you? Sarah's hands were still shaking. Her leg was screaming. Every instinct told her to run. But she looked at that young corpsman's desperate face and heard herself say 3 words she thought she'd never speak again. I'm Angel 6. Every Marine in that building snapped to attention. And Dr. Richard Chen's world turned upside down. The silence that followed Sarah's declaration lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then, as one unified movement, every Marine in St. Mary's Hospital snapped to the position of attention, back straight, heels together, eyes forward, the kind of respect reserved for generals and Medal of Honor recipients. Gunnery Sergeant Morrison's scarred face transformed. The hard warrior exterior cracked, revealing something almost like awe. Ma'am. His voice dropped to something reverent, almost gentle. We've been looking everywhere for you. Dr. Chen's head swiveled between Sarah and the Marines like he was watching a tennis match played in a foreign language. What? What is happening right now? Morrison ignored him completely. He took 3 steps towards Sarah, and despite being nearly a foot taller and probably 100 pounds heavier, he moved like he was approaching something precious and fragile. His hand went to his vest, pulling out a weathered photograph protected in a plastic sleeve. Is this you, ma'am? Sarah's breath caught. She knew that photo, knew it because she'd tried to forget it for 3 years. The image showed a younger version of herself, 39, not 42, no gray in her hair yet, no lines around her eyes. She stood in a desert flight suit, covered in blood that wasn't hers, in front of a U-60 Blackhawk helicopter that looked like it had gone through a shredder. Bullet holes riddled the fuselage. The tail rotor was completely gone. One landing skid was bent at an impossible angle. Smoke still rose from the engine. And painted on the side, in white letters that stood out against the desert camouflage, Angel 6. That was 3 years ago, Sarah whispered, her voice raw. That bird shouldn't have been flyable. It wasn't, ma'am. Morrison's voice was thick with emotion. Flight engineers said it was a miracle you kept it in the air at all. The after-action report said the hydraulics were shot. You lost your tail rotor over hostile territory, and you flew 23 miles on prayers and sheer force of will. Around them, hospital staff had begun to gather. Nurses, doctors, orderlies, all drawn by the commotion. They stared at Sarah like they'd never seen her before, because they hadn't, not really. That's not even her most famous bird, another Marine spoke up. A staff sergeant older with a combat action ribbon and enough hash marks to indicate 20 years of service. He pulled out his phone, brought up an image, and held it up for everyone to see. This is the one that made her a legend. The photo showed a different helicopter, a CH-53E Super Stallion, the same model sitting in their parking lot. But this one was destroyed. The entire tail section was missing, blown off by what looked like an RPG strike. The cabin was scorched black, and somehow, impossibly, 12 Marines sat beside it, alive, bandaged, looking at the camera with the expression of men who'd seen death and walked away. October 17, 2021, the staff sergeant said quietly. Helmand Province. Angel 6's bird took a direct hit during an extraction. RPG struck the tail section mid-flight. She lost all hydraulics, all electrical, and the entire tail assembly. Standard procedure is to bail out. The bird's going down no matter what, so you jump and hope for the best. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. She didn't want to hear this, didn't want to remember. But the staff sergeant continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the now silent ER. Angel 6 didn't bail. She had 12 wounded Marines in her bird, so she wrote it down. Auto-rotated a 53,000-pound helicopter with no tail, no power, and no hydraulics into a landing that should have killed everyone on board. He paused, his voice breaking slightly. 3 crew members died in the crash. The pilot, the crew chief, and the door gunner, but those 12 Marines. Every single one survived. Angel 6 pulled them out of the burning wreck with a shattered leg, dragged them 200 yards away, and provided medical treatment until ground forces arrived. Dr. Chen's face had gone pale. Around him, the hospital staff stared at Sarah with expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. That's impossible, Chen breathed. A helicopter that size, a crash like that. I have the Navy Cross to prove it, sir, Morrison said flatly. Angel 6 does too, along with her Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars with Valor and a Purple Heart. He turned back to Sarah. Ma'am, every Marine in 2nd MEF knows your call sign. You're in our training manuals. New corpsmen study your trauma protocols. You've saved more combat casualties than any flight nurse in naval aviation history. 43 missions, another Marine added. 0 patients lost in flight, not one. In 3 years of flying into hot zones, taking fire, dealing with mass casualties, not one Marine died in your bird. Sarah's vision blurred. The ER was starting to spin. Too many eyes, too much attention, too many memories crashing back. She saw their faces. The ones she saved, yes, but also the 3 she lost. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Hayes, her pilot. Chief Petty Officer David Rodriguez, her crew chief. Petty Officer 2nd Class Amanda Chen, her door gunner. She heard Amanda's last words screamed over the roar of flames. Get them out. Get them out. Stop, Sarah said quietly. The Marines fell silent immediately. You want to know why I left? Her voice was steady now, cold. You want to know why Angel 6 disappeared? She stepped forward, and despite her limp, despite being half the size of these warriors, they gave way before her. I'll tell you, that crash, I made a choice. The bird was going down. I could have ditched it over water, given everyone a chance to bail out and survive. But those 12 Marines were critical, chest wounds, head trauma, severed arteries. They couldn't bail. They couldn't swim. They'd die the second they hit water. She stopped in front of Morrison, looking up at his scarred face. So I chose solid ground, tried to put it down in a clearing, but my crew, my family, they were in the cockpit and the doors, the impact zones. They took the force of the crash so those 12 Marines would live. Her voice cracked. I chose 12 strangers over 3 people I loved like family, and I've lived with that choice every single day since. The ER was absolutely silent. Even the sounds from the trauma bays seemed muted. Ma'am, Morrison's voice was gentle. Those 3 crew members, I knew Chief Rodriguez, served with him on my first deployment, and I can tell you without hesitation that he'd make the same choice 1,000 times over. They all would, because that's who they were, that's who we are. Doesn't make it hurt less, Sarah whispered. No, ma'am, it doesn't. Morrison pulled out his radio. But right now, we've got 18 more Marines who need you to make that same choice, to put their lives above your pain, above your fear. His voice hardened. One of them is a 19-year-old lance corporal with his whole life ahead of him. Another is a 22-year-old who just found out his wife is pregnant. We've got a staff sergeant with 4 kids waiting for him to come home. Sarah's jaw clenched, her leg throbbed, her hands shook. They're dying, ma'am, Morrison said quietly. And we don't have anyone else who can save them. Our surgeons are good, but they're overwhelmed. They're not you. They haven't done what you've done. They can't do what you can do. Dr. Chen finally found his voice. Sarah, you don't have to. Shut up, Richard. The words came out flat and cold. Sarah turned to face him. You told me to step aside, said I'd slow down the team, said I wasn't capable. She gestured at the Marines around them. These men flew 90 miles in heavy birds, landed without clearance at a civilian hospital, and risked court-martial all to find me, because they know something you don't. They know that the limp doesn't matter, the age doesn't matter, the PTSD doesn't matter. When it counts, when lives are on the line, I'm the best there is. She turned back to Morrison. What's the tactical situation? The gunny's face hardened back into professional mode. Training exercise at Quantico, ma'am. Combined arms, live fire evolution. Someone screwed up the IED simulation, real explosives instead of smoke charges. Building came down on 2 squads. Then in the confusion, live rounds got loaded into weapons that should have had blanks. We've got blast casualties, crush injuries, GSWs, chemical exposure from a ruptured storage facility, and multiple traumatic amputations. Sarah's mind was already working, running through triage protocols, supply needs, surgical priorities. How many surgical teams at Quantico's hospital? 2, ma'am, both overwhelmed. How many critical cases? 18 confirmed, another 23 urgent. Time since initial casualties? 47 minutes. Sarah's eyes closed. In combat trauma, you had what they called the golden hour. 60 minutes to get critical patients into surgery or they died. They'd already burned 3/4 of it. Your nephew, she said to Chen without looking at him. Sucking chest wound, 47 minutes ago. He's probably gone into tension pneumothorax by now. Without immediate needle decompression and chest tube placement, he's got maybe 10 minutes left. Less if he's already in cardiac arrest. Chen's face went white as paper. Oh God. Sarah turned to Morrison. I need my gear. I keep a go bag in my locker, trauma supplies, surgical equipment, and I need. Ma'am, Morrison pulled a tactical vest from his pack. We brought yours. It was her old flight vest, the one she'd worn on every mission, still stained with blood and carbon scoring. Her name was embroidered above the right pocket, LTSMITCHELL, and below it in smaller letters, Angel 6. Sarah stared at it like it was a ghost. We never threw it away, ma'am, Morrison said quietly. Kept it in the unit headquarters, just in case you ever came back. Sarah's hand stopped shaking. Something inside her, something that had been broken for 3 years, clicked back into place. Not healed, never healed, but functional, operational. She took the vest from Morrison's hands. Get your bird spun up, Gunny, she said, her voice steady and cold as steel. We're leaving in 60 seconds, and Richard, she turned to Dr. Chen one last time. If you fire me for this, that's fine, but right now I've got Marines to save. She pulled on the vest. It fit like it had never left. Angel 6 had returned. And God help anyone who got in her way. Sarah's fingers trembled as they touched the tactical vest. The fabric was stiff with old blood, some hers, most not. The weight of it in her hands wasn't just physical. It was 3 years of nightmares, 43 missions, and 3 deaths she could never take back. Ma'am, Morrison's voice seemed to come from very far away. We need to move. The ER had become a theater, and Sarah was center stage. Hospital staff formed a semicircle around her. nurses she'd worked beside for 3 years, doctors who'd seen her as nothing more than the broken woman with a limp, patients who'd never known that the quiet nurse who checked their vitals was a decorated combat veteran. And Dr. Richard Chen, whose face had transformed from outrage to something close to panic. "Sarah," Chen stepped forward, his voice taking on a desperate edge. "You can't do this. You're not active duty anymore. You're a civilian. You work for this hospital, and I'm ordering you, as your supervisor, to stay here and complete your shift." Sarah didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the vest, on the faded name tape, on the call sign she'd thought she'd never wear again. "You ordered me to step aside an hour ago, said I'd slow down your team." "That was before," Chen sputtered. "This is different. You have responsibilities here, and you're in no condition, your leg, your medical restrictions." "My medical restrictions?" Sarah's voice was soft, dangerous. "Tell me, Richard, what do my restrictions say?" Chen blinked, caught off guard. Limited standing, no prolonged physical exertion, accommodations for mobility. "And what was I doing when you told me to step aside?" Sarah finally looked at him. "I was standing, at my station, ready to work. You didn't sideline me because of my restrictions. You sidelined me because you decided I wasn't good enough." Around them, the hospital staff shifted uncomfortably. They'd all seen it. They'd all said nothing. Morrison cleared his throat. "Ma'am, with respect, we're burning time. Lance Corporal Chen." "Is my nephew," Chen's voice cracked. "My brother's son. Sarah, please, if you have any compassion, but you can't go. You're not military anymore. This isn't your responsibility. And if something happens to you, the liability alone." Liability. The word tasted like ashes in Sarah's mouth. She looked at the young corpsman standing beside Morrison, the kid with red-rimmed eyes whose brother was bleeding out 90 miles away. "Your nephew is dying, Richard, and you're worried about liability." "I'm worried about you." Chen's professional facade shattered completely. "Look at yourself. You can barely walk. You shake when you hear loud noises. You take enough medication to stock a pharmacy. What happens when you get there and freeze? When the PTSD kicks in and you can't function? These Marines need help, not a..." "Not a what?" Sarah's voice dropped to absolute zero. "Say it. Not a broken woman, not a cripple, not a washed-up nurse who should have stayed retired." The silence was deafening. Sarah's hands had stopped shaking. She held Chen's gaze without blinking. "You want to know what happens when I freeze? I'll tell you. Nothing. Because I don't freeze. Not when lives are on the line. I've performed emergency thoracotomies while taking enemy fire. I've held a man's severed artery closed for 40 minutes because we didn't have enough hands. I've talked a 19-year-old corpsman through a cricothyrotomy over radio while directing 3 other teams simultaneously." She took a step forward, and despite her limp, there was something predatory in the movement. "You see a broken woman. These Marines see the person who wrote half the trauma protocols they train with. You see someone who slows down the team. They see someone who's never lost a patient in flight. You see limitations. They see the legend." "Sarah," Chen tried again, but Morrison cut him off. "Sir, with all due respect, this isn't your call." The gunny's voice was respectful but immovable. "Lieutenant Mitchell is a naval reservist on inactive status. Under Title 10, Section 12301, we can recall her to active duty for emergency operations. The moment she puts on that vest, she's under our jurisdiction, not yours." Sarah's heart hammered. A way out, legal protection, but also a way back in. The vest felt heavier now. Heavier because she knew what putting it on meant. It meant stepping back into the fire, back into the nightmares, back into a world where split-second decisions meant life or death, and you carried every death with you forever. Her leg throbbed. Phantom pain shot up from the old shrapnel wounds. She could feel the scar tissue pulling, the metal pins the surgeons had used to rebuild her femur. On bad days, and this was already a bad day, it felt like her leg was still on fire, still burning from the explosion that had destroyed her helicopter and killed her crew. Amanda's last words, "Get them out, get them out." Marcus's voice over the dying radio, "Sarah, we're going down, brace for." David's hand on her shoulder seconds before impact, "It's okay, we knew the risks." Sarah closed her eyes. The ER faded away. She was back in that bird, feeling it disintegrate around her, feeling the heat of the flames, hearing the screaming. "Ma'am." A hand on her shoulder, gentle, steady. Sarah's eyes snapped open. The young corpsman stood before her, the one whose brother was dying. Up close, she could see he was even younger than she'd thought, 21, maybe 22. Baby-faced, with freckles and eyes that had seen too much too fast. "My brother's name is James," he said quietly. "He enlisted because he wanted to be like me. I told him the Marines would make him strong, give him purpose. I told him it was the best decision I ever made." His voice cracked. "If he dies because I'm not good enough to save him, because I don't have the skills, I'll carry that forever. But if you're there, if Angel 6 is there." He swallowed hard. "Please, ma'am, I know you're scared, I know it hurts. But please don't let my brother die, because I wasn't good enough." The words hit like a physical blow. Sarah saw herself in that kid's face, saw the guilt, the desperation, the weight of responsibility that would crush him if his brother died. She knew that weight, carried it every day, 3 deaths that should have been hers. But also, 43 lives that wouldn't exist without her. 43 Marines who went home to their families. 43 futures that happened because she'd refused to quit. "What's your name, corpsman?" Sarah asked. "Petty Officer 2nd Class Michael Chen, ma'am." Chen, of course. Sarah looked back at Richard Chen, saw the family resemblance now, saw the terror in his eyes, not for his hospital, not for liability, for his family. "Richard," Sarah's voice was gentler now, "I know you're scared, I am too. Every single time I put on this vest I'm terrified, but your nephew, your brother's son, he deserves someone who won't quit on him. Someone who will fight like hell to keep him alive." She paused. "You told me I'd slow down the team. You were wrong, but more than that, you forgot something important. We don't leave our wounded behind, not in combat, not in hospitals, not ever." She pulled the vest over her head. It settled onto her shoulders like it had never left. Familiar, heavy, right. Dr. Richard Chen stared at her, his face a mask of conflicting emotions, anger, fear, helplessness, and something that might have been respect. "You're fired," he said, but his voice was hollow. "The moment you step onto that helicopter, you're terminated from St. Mary's Hospital." "I know." Sarah adjusted the vest straps, muscle memory taking over. "But some things are more important than a job." She turned to Morrison. "What's our flight time to Quantico?" 12 minutes, ma'am." James Chen's condition. Last radio update was 5 minutes ago. Tension pneumothorax confirmed. They've done needle decompression twice, but he's still in respiratory distress. They're trying to place a chest tube, but they're not confident in the placement," Sarah finished. "Probably because they're doing it in suboptimal conditions with limited light and equipment." Her mind was already moving, running through protocols, anticipating complications. "I'll need a thoracotomy kit standing by. If that chest tube isn't working, we may need to crack his chest to access the source of the bleeding directly." Morrison's eyebrows rose. "In the field, ma'am." "If necessary." Sarah's voice was steady now, clinical. The fear was still there, would always be there, but it was locked away in a compartment she'd learned to seal tight. "What else?" "Multiple GSWs, ma'am. 3 critical, 1 through and through to the abdomen, 1 to the upper thigh with suspected femoral artery damage, 1 to the chest. Blast casualties include traumatic amputations, TBI, and—" "I've got it." Sarah held up a hand. "We'll triage on arrival. Red's first, yellow's second. Anyone who's black," she paused. "Black tags men expectant. Too injured to save. Better to focus resources on those with a chance. Anyone who's black gets comfort care, but we don't waste time we can't spare." It was cold, clinical, brutal. It was also the only way to save the most lives. Jessica Chen, the young nurse who'd pitied Sarah that morning, stepped forward suddenly. "I'm coming with you." Sarah blinked. "What?" "I'm a trauma nurse. You'll need extra hands. I'm coming." "Absolutely not," Dr. Chen barked. "I forbid." "You just fired Sarah for helping," Jessica shot back, her voice stronger than Sarah had ever heard it. "You going to fire me too? Fine. But I'm not standing here while people die because we were too scared to help." Two more nurses stepped forward, then an ER doctor, then another. Morrison looked at Sarah, a question in his eyes. Sarah felt something crack in her chest, not breaking but opening. These people who'd worked beside her for 3 years, who'd never really seen her until this moment, they were willing to risk everything too. "No," Sarah said firmly. "Morrison, your birds can't carry extra weight. Every pound matters. And these people," she gestured to the hospital staff, "they're needed here. Those casualties from the highway accident, they still need care." She locked eyes with Jessica. "Thank you, but the best thing you can do is save the lives here. Leave Quantico to me." Jessica nodded, tears in her eyes. Sarah turned to Morrison. "Gunny, we've wasted enough time. Let's move." "Yes, ma'am." Morrison keyed his radio. "All units, Angel 6 is in the bird. Spin up and prepare for immediate dust-off." The roar of the helicopter engines began building. The rotors started their cycle. Sarah walked toward the exit, her limp pronounced but steady. Behind her, she heard Dr. Chen call out one last time. "Sarah, when you come back, if you come back, we need to talk." She didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge him, because the truth was she might not come back. Combat medicine was unpredictable, dangerous, and Sarah had already used up most of her luck 3 years ago. But 18 Marines were dying, and Angel 6 never left anyone behind. She climbed into the lead helicopter, settling into a seat that felt like coming home. The crew chief, a grizzled staff sergeant with 30 years of scars, handed her a headset. "Welcome back, ma'am," he said simply. The helicopter lifted off, and Sarah watched St. Mary's Hospital shrink below them. Somewhere down there, Dr. Richard Chen was watching her go. But Sarah's mind was already 90 miles ahead, in a disaster zone where 18 young Marines were counting on a limping, broken, 42-year-old nurse to save their lives. God help them all. Because Angel 6 was coming. And hell was coming with her. The CH-53E Super Stallion's interior was a sensory assault that threw Sarah 3 years into the past. The deafening roar of the engines, the smell of hydraulic fluid and sweat, the vibration that made her teeth rattle, the crew chief's voice crackling through the headset. Every detail was exactly as she remembered. Exactly as her nightmares remembered. Her hands gripped the seat restraints so tightly her knuckles went white. Beneath her flight suit, no, beneath her scrubs under the tactical vest, her heart hammered against her ribs like it was trying to escape. The 12-minute flight to Quantico felt like 12 hours and 12 seconds simultaneously. "Ma'am," Morrison's voice came through the headset, steady and professional. "I'm going to brief you on what we're flying into." Sarah forced herself to nod, forced herself to breathe. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The breathing technique the VA therapist had taught her, it helped. Barely. At 8:47 this morning, 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines began a combined arms training evolution at range 410, Morrison continued. His voice was clinical, detached, the way soldiers talked about trauma when they couldn't afford emotions. Live fire drill with simulated IED threats, except somebody screwed up. The charges that were supposed to be smoke simulators, they were actual C4. Sarah's stomach dropped. How much? 20 pounds. In a building with 2 reinforced squads, 18 Marines. Morrison's jaw clenched. The blast brought down the entire structure. We had Marines buried under concrete, rebar through limbs, crush injuries to torsos and heads. Through the helicopter's small window, Sarah could see the Virginia landscape blurring past. They were flying low and fast, the treetops whipping by close enough to touch. Standard tactical approach: stay below radar, minimize exposure time. Just like Afghanistan. It gets worse, Morrison said. In the chaos after the explosion during the rescue operation, someone loaded live ammunition into weapons that should have had blanks. We still don't know how, but during casualty extraction, shots were fired. 5 Marines took rounds, 2 critical GSWs, 3 stable. Jesus Christ! Sarah closed her eyes. Friendly fire, the worst kind of casualty, the kind that haunted you forever because it was preventable. And then, Morrison's voice dropped even lower. The blast ruptured a storage facility adjacent to the training site. Chemical exposure. We're not sure what yet, but we've got Marines with respiratory distress, chemical burns, possible nerve agent exposure. Sarah's eyes snapped open. Nerve agent, you're telling me this now? We don't know for sure, ma'am. Could be industrial cleaning agents, could be training materials. But we've got 3 Marines seizing, and atropine isn't helping much. The helicopter banked hard left and Sarah's stomach lurched. Her legs screamed in protest, the sudden movement aggravating old injuries. She gritted her teeth against the pain. Current casualty count, Morrison continued, pulling out a tablet that showed a real-time triage board. 18 critical red tags, 23 urgent yellow tags, 41 walking wounded green tags, and, he paused, 2 black tags confirmed, expectant. 2 already dead or as good as. Sarah felt the familiar weight settle onto her shoulders, the weight every combat medic carried, the knowledge that you couldn't save everyone, that sometimes you had to choose who lived and who died. The 19-year-old, James Chen, Sarah forced herself to ask. Morrison's face was grim. Still red-tagged. Last update 3 minutes ago, he's in respiratory arrest. They've placed a chest tube, but there's massive hemothorax, blood in the chest cavity. They can't control the bleeding. Without surgical intervention in the next 15 minutes. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. Hemothorax after blast trauma usually meant lacerated intercostal arteries or damage to the lung tissue itself. A chest tube might drain the blood but wouldn't stop the source. He'd need a thoracotomy, cracking the chest open to access and repair the damage. In a field environment, with limited equipment, and a clock ticking down. Equipment situation, Sarah asked, her voice steadier now. Training was kicking in, pushing past the fear. 2 mobile surgical units operational. Quantico's hospital is maxed out. They're running 3 ORs simultaneously but can't take more. We've got field surgeons, but they're overwhelmed. Most of our corpsmen are green, good kids, solid training, but they've never seen anything like this. Sarah understood. Book learning was one thing. Actual mass casualty events were something else entirely. The chaos, the screaming, the blood, the impossible decisions. You couldn't train for that. You could only survive it. Who's the ranking medical officer on site? Sarah asked. Commander Patricia Walsh, Navy surgeon. 20 years experience, 2 deployments. She's good, ma'am, but she's drowning. The helicopter began its descent. Through the window, Sarah could see Quantico Marine Corps Base spreading out below them, and in the center. "Oh God," she whispered. The training range looked like a war zone. Smoke still rose from the collapsed building, a 3-story structure now reduced to a pile of concrete and twisted rebar. Emergency vehicles surrounded the site like circling sharks. Ambulances, fire trucks, command vehicles, and everywhere, scattered like broken dolls, were casualties. Even from 300 feet up, Sarah could see the triage areas. The red tarps marking critical casualties, the yellow tarps for urgent, the green areas for walking wounded. And off to one side, covered in black tarps, the expectant and deceased. Sarah's breath caught, her vision tunneled. The scene below blurred and shifted, becoming another disaster another time. Afghanistan, the fob that took mortar fire. The casualties spread across the landing zone, the smell of burning flesh in. "Ma'am," Morrison's voice cut through the flashback. "You okay?" Sarah sucked in air. Her hands were shaking again. The old wounds in her leg throbbed in time with her racing heart. PTSD symptoms, hypervigilance, flashbacks, physical manifestation of psychological trauma. She knew the clinical terms. They didn't help. "I can't do this," part of her screamed. "I'm not ready. I'm broken. I'll freeze. I'll fail them." The helicopter's wheels touched down. The crew chief was already moving, sliding the door open. The sounds hit her like a physical force, screaming, shouting, the wail of sirens, the thunder of generators powering the mobile surgical units. Morrison unbuckled, turned to her. "Ma'am, we're here. I need to know, are you good?" Sarah sat frozen. Her hands gripped the seat restraints. Her legs screamed. Her mind was a battlefield of fear and duty, trauma and training. Through the open door, she could see the nearest triage area. A young corpsman, couldn't be more than 20, was performing chest compressions on a casualty. His technique was wrong. Too high on the sternum, not deep enough. The Marine beneath him was dying and the kid didn't know how to fix it. Beyond him, she saw Commander Walsh, a woman in her 40s, blood-soaked surgical gown, face drawn with exhaustion, directing 2 teams simultaneously. Saw the desperation in her movements. Saw her pointing at a casualty, then stopping, overwhelmed by the sheer number of wounded. Saw her make the decision no one wanted to make, turning away from one Marine to focus on another. Triage, cold calculus, save who you can, let go of who you can't. The Marine she turned away from was young, maybe 20. His eyes were open, conscious, terrified. He knew what the black tarp being unfolded nearby meant. Sarah's hands released the restraints. She didn't remember making the decision, didn't remember choosing. One moment she was frozen and the next she was moving. Her leg barely registered. The pain was there but distant, irrelevant. She hit the ground at a dead run, or as close to running as her damaged leg allowed. Morrison shouted something behind her, but she was already crossing the triage area, already dropping to her knees beside the young corpsman doing chest compressions. "Stop," she said. The corpsman looked up, confused, panicked. "Ma'am, I have to." "You're doing it wrong, too high, not deep enough. You're wasting time and breaking ribs without perfusing his brain." Sarah's hands pushed his aside, found the correct position on the sternum and began compressions with the mechanical precision of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. 2 inches deep, 100 compressions per minute. "Count with me." Her hands moved, the corpsman stared. "Count," Sarah barked. 1, 2, 3, 4. The kid's voice was shaky but getting stronger. Sarah's eyes swept the casualty. Massive chest trauma, probable cardiac tamponade, blood filling the pericardial sac around the heart, preventing it from beating effectively. Compressions wouldn't save him. He needed pericardiocentesis, needed a needle in his chest to drain the blood. "I need a spinal needle, 18 gauge or larger," Sarah shouted to no one and everyone. A Marine appeared with a field surgical kit. Sarah didn't look up, didn't break rhythm with the compressions. "Open it, find the longest needle you have, and get me ultrasound if we have it. If not, I'm going blind." "We don't have ultrasound here, ma'am," the Marine said. "Then I'm going blind." Sarah finally stopped compressions, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. She palpated the chest, counting ribs, finding landmarks. 4th intercostal space just left of the sternum. "Hold him steady." The needle went in. Sarah felt the resistance of tissue, then the give as she penetrated the pericardium. Dark blood flooded back through the needle conformation. Cardiac tamponade. She aspirated 50 milliliters of blood, then 60, 70. The Marine beneath her gasped. His eyes opened. His heart rhythm on the portable monitor shifted from the erratic pattern of a dying heart to something that looked almost normal. "Holy shit," the corpsman breathed. Sarah pulled the needle, applied pressure, and was already standing. Her eyes swept the triage area with the cold efficiency of a predator selecting prey. Not prey patients, priorities, who needed her most, who she could save, who was beyond saving. Commander Walsh was suddenly beside her, eyes wide. "Who the hell are you?" Sarah met her gaze. "Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, Navy Reserve. Call sign Angel 6. Walsh's face transformed. "The Angel 6, oh thank God." Her professional composure cracked slightly. "Commander, we're drowning. I've got 18 critical casualties, 2 surgical teams, and not enough hands or time. We've already lost 2 and we're about to lose." "You're not losing anyone else." Sarah's voice was absolute zero, cold, hard, final. "Where's James Chen, the 19-year-old with hemothorax?" "Trauma Bay 3. We've drained 2 liters of blood from his chest, but we can't stop the bleeding. He needs a thoracotomy, but you don't have time or resources to crack his chest in the field," Sarah finished. "Wrong, you have me. Take me to him. Now." Walsh hesitated for only a second. Then she was moving and Sarah followed. Behind them, Gunnery Sergeant Morrison watched Angel 6 stride into the disaster zone with her distinctive limp, her gray-threaded hair coming loose from its bun, her 42-year-old body carrying wounds that should have ended her career. And he saw what Dr. Richard Chen had been too blind to see. He saw a legend. He saw a warrior. He saw Angel 6, and she was terrifying. Trauma Bay 3 was a nightmare wrapped in canvas and desperation. Lance Corporal James Chen lay on a field surgical table, his chest rising and falling in shallow, rapid gasps that meant his body was losing the fight. 2 corpsmen worked frantically, one managing the chest tube that drained blood into a collection chamber, the other trying to maintain IV access in veins that were collapsing from blood loss. The numbers on the portable monitor told a story Sarah had read too many times. BP 70/40 and dropping. Heart rate 140 and climbing. Oxygen saturation 82% despite high-flow oxygen. A young man bleeding to death internally while everyone watched helplessly. "How much blood have you given him?" Sarah demanded, her hands already moving to assess the patient. A young corpsman, his name tape-read JENKINS, looked up with eyes that had seen too much. 6 units. He's gone through all our O-negative. We're waiting for more from Quantico Hospital, but by the time it gets here, he'll be dead. Sarah's fingers palpated James's chest, distended, firm. The chest tube was draining, but not enough. The blood was collecting faster than they could remove it. Output from the chest tube: 2,000 milliliters in the last 30 minutes. Sarah's jaw clenched. Anything over 1,500 milliliters or a sustained output over 200 ml per hour meant one thing: thoracotomy. They needed to open his chest, find the source of bleeding, and repair it directly. In a hospital, this was a major surgery requiring an OR, a surgical team, and hours of careful work. In a field tent with limited supplies, and a patient who had minutes, not hours. "I need a thoracotomy kit, full surgical setup, betadine, and get me another pair of hands, someone with surgical experience." Sarah's voice cut through the chaos like a scalpel. Commander Walsh appeared beside her. "Lieutenant, even if we crack his chest, the mortality rate in field conditions is—" "I don't care about statistics, I care about this Marine." Sarah looked Walsh dead in the eye. "I've done 17 field thoracotomies, 13 survived. Those are better odds than he is right now. Are you going to help me, or are you going to stand there and watch him die?" Walsh's hesitation lasted exactly 2 seconds, then her face hardened into professional determination. "Jenkins, get the thoracotomy kit. Patterson, prep for emergency surgery. Everyone else, clear the area except you." She pointed at a Navy surgeon, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Stone. "You're assisting." The team moved like a choreographed dance. Within 90 seconds, James Chen's left chest was prepped and draped. Sarah stood on his left side, scalpel in hand, her legs screaming from standing but her hands steady as stone. Lateral thoracotomy, fifth intercostal space, Sarah announced, her voice clear and calm. On my mark, mark. The scalpel moved. Skin parted. Sarah's hands worked with mechanical precision, cutting through layers of muscle, spreading ribs with a retractor that made sickening cracking sounds. James Chen was sedated, paralyzed, breathing only because of the bag valve mask Jenkins was operating. Retractor, Sarah said. Stone placed it. More, I need visualization. There, hold it there. The chest cavity opened and dark blood flooded out. Sarah's hands were inside before it fully drained, palpating, searching, finding. There, intercostal artery, completely severed. Her fingers found the vessel, applied pressure. The bleeding slowed. Clamp, I need a vascular clamp. Stone handed it over. Sarah's fingers worked inside the chest cavity, blind, relying on touch and experience. She found the artery, traced it proximally, isolated it. Clamped, she said. The bleeding stopped. Suture 30 silk. For the next 8 minutes, Sarah Mitchell performed microsurgery inside a human chest cavity with her bare hands in a field tent, with inadequate lighting and equipment that belonged in a museum. Her fingers sutured the severed artery with stitches so precise they could have been done by a machine. Around the trauma bay, work had stopped. Corpsmen, nurses, other casualties, everyone who could see was watching. Watching the limping nurse with gray in her hair perform surgery that shouldn't be possible outside a hospital. Test the repair, Sarah said. Stone released the clamp slowly. Blood flowed through the repaired artery, no leaking, perfect. Jesus Christ, Stone breathed. That's textbook, better than textbook. That's Angel 6, Walsh said quietly. Word had spread. Everyone knew now. Sarah wasn't finished. She checked the lung tissue, found 3 small lacerations from bone fragments and repaired those too. Checked for other bleeding sources. Found none. Only then did she step back. Close him up, she said to Stone. 2 chest tubes, 1 anterior, 1 posterior. Broad-spectrum antibiotics. He'll need a blood transfusion for the next 12 hours, but he'll live. She stripped off her gloves and was already moving before anyone could respond. Ma'am, you need to, Commander Walsh started, but Sarah was already at the next casualty. A staff sergeant with a traumatic amputation below the knee. The tourniquet was on, but it had been on for 90 minutes too long. The leg was unsalvageable, but the Marine was trying to hide how much pain he was in. Sarah dropped to her knees beside him. What's your name, Staff Sergeant? Reynolds, ma'am. His teeth were clenched. I'm okay, help the others first. Reynolds, your leg is gone and you're not okay, but you're also not dying, which means I can take 30 seconds to make sure you're not suffering. Sarah's hands checked his vitals, adjusted his IV and pushed morphine. There. Better. Reynolds's face relaxed slightly. Yes, ma'am, thank you. Thank you for your service, Staff Sergeant. You're going to be fine. Sarah squeezed his shoulder and moved on. The next 3 hours became a blur of controlled chaos. Sarah was everywhere, directing, teaching, saving. She talked a terrified corpsman through placing a difficult IV line, performed an emergency cricothyrotomy on a Marine whose airway was swelling shut from chemical exposure, diagnosed a tension pneumothorax by touch alone and decompressed it with a needle. She worked on her knees when her leg gave out, crawled when she had to, and never stopped moving, never stopped fighting. Word spread through Quantico like wildfire. Marines who'd served in Afghanistan started arriving, veterans who'd heard the call sign and came to help. They brought stories with them. That's her, a gunnery sergeant with one eye told a group of younger Marines. 2019 Helmand Province. Taliban ambush, 8 casualties. Her bird took an RPG through the cargo bay mid-flight. She landed it anyway, extracted all 8, and provided medical care until ground forces arrived. Never lost one. I heard she held a guy's heart in her hand for 40 minutes. another Marine added. Literally held his heart, kept it beating manually while they flew him to surgery. 2021, an older staff sergeant said quietly. Kabul evacuation, the blast at Abbey Gate. She was there, triaged over 200 casualties in 6 hours, saved 73 lives that day. The stories grew, spreading through the base. Some were true, some were exaggerated. All of them painted the same picture. Angel 6 was legend, and the legend was here. By hour 4, Sarah had personally treated 32 critical casualties. 15 required surgical intervention. 2 required procedures that had never been documented in field conditions. All of them lived. The young corpsmen and medical students watched her with awe, watched how she moved, economical, efficient, never wasting motion despite her limp. Watched how she taught clear, concise, building confidence instead of tearing it down. Watched how she led, calm under pressure, decisive without being arrogant, fierce without being cruel. She makes it look easy, Jenkins whispered to Patterson. It's not easy, Commander Walsh said, overhearing. It's 43 combat deployments worth of experience compressed into muscle memory. It's training refined by necessity. It's talent honed by tragedy. She watched Sarah perform a field amputation with steady hands. That's what excellence looks like. That's what legend looks like. Sarah didn't hear them, couldn't afford to. She was too focused on the next patient, the next crisis, the next life hanging in the balance. Her leg was bleeding through her pants. She'd torn something, pushed too hard. Her hands trembled between patients. Her back screamed from hours of kneeling. Every old wound, every piece of shrapnel still lodged in her body, every scar tissue adhesion, all of it was on fire. She didn't care. Because 18 critical casualties had become 15, then 12, then 8, then 5. And then, as the sun began to set over Quantico, as the last helicopters arrived to transport the stable patients to definitive care, as the chaos finally began to settle into exhausted relief. Zero critical casualties remaining. Everyone who could be saved had been saved. Sarah stood in the center of the now quiet triage area, covered in blood that wasn't hers, swaying slightly from exhaustion and pain. Her tactical vest hung heavy on her shoulders. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking now. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the cost of the last 4 hours was crashing down on her like a physical weight. Commander Walsh approached slowly. Lieutenant Mitchell, final count, 18 critical casualties. 16 survived. 2 were expectant before you arrived. Nothing could have been done. Of the 16 you treated, all 16 are alive and stable. That's, her voice broke. That's impossible. That's a 100% save rate on critical combat casualties in field conditions. Sarah said nothing, couldn't speak. The weight of it, the lives, the decisions, the blood was crushing her. Around the triage area, Marines began to notice. One by one, they stopped what they were doing. Corpsmen, doctors, casualties who could stand, support personnel, security. And as one, they came to attention. Then slowly, deliberately, Gunnery Sergeant Morrison began to clap. The applause spread. Slow at first, then building. Marines who couldn't stand raised their fists. Those who could stand saluted. The applause became thunderous, echoing across the devastated training range. Sarah Mitchell, Angel 6, stood in the center of it all, tears streaming down her face, body shaking, leg bleeding, hands covered in blood. And for the first time in 3 years, she felt like maybe, just maybe, the legend hadn't died with her crew. Maybe Angel 6 had never truly left. Maybe she'd just been waiting for someone to need her again. The applause faded. The Marines dispersed. The sun set over Quantico, painting the devastated training range in shades of orange and red that reminded Sarah too much of fire. She stood alone in the triage area, surrounded by the aftermath of war, discarded medical supplies, blood-stained tarps, empty IV bags swaying in the evening breeze like forgotten prayers. The smell of antiseptic and copper hung heavy in the air. Her ears rang with phantom screams that weren't there anymore. Her leg finally gave out. Sarah didn't fall so much as fold. Her right leg simply stopped supporting weight. She caught herself on a supply crate, then slid down to sit on the ground, her back against the metal container. Her hands were shaking so violently she had to clasp them together to make it stop. It didn't work. The adrenaline was gone. The mission focus that had carried her through the last 6 hours had evaporated like morning mist, and in its absence, everything hurt. Her leg was on fire. Looking down, she could see the dark stain spreading through her scrub pants, fresh blood from torn surgical repairs that had held for 3 years until today. Her back screamed from hours of kneeling. Her shoulders ached from the weight of the tactical vest. Even her hands hurt, cramped from holding instruments and applying pressure and performing miracles that shouldn't have been possible. But the physical pain was nothing compared to what was happening in her mind. The faces were coming back, not the ones she'd saved today. Those would come later in gentler memories. No, these were the other faces, the ones that haunted her dreams, the 3 crew members who died in the crash. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Hayes, her pilot, who'd kept the helicopter level long enough for her to secure the patients. Chief Petty Officer David Rodriguez, who'd helped her pull wounded Marines from the wreckage despite his own fatal injuries. Petty Officer Second Class Amanda Chen, who died shielding a wounded Marine with her own body. Get them out, get them out. Amanda's last words echoed in Sarah's mind. Sarah had gotten them out, all 12, and in doing so she'd used up the last moments she could have spent trying to save her crew. That was the choice. That was always the choice. Save the many by sacrificing the few. Tactical, logical, necessary. And it was killing her. You look like hell, Mitchell. The voice came from behind her, deep, familiar, touched with an accent that spoke of Texas and too many deployments. Sarah's head snapped up. Colonel Marcus Webb stood silhouetted against the dying light. He wore desert camouflage with an eagle insignia on his collar. His right arm ended at the elbow, a prosthetic where flesh and bone used to be. His face was weathered, scarred, the kind of face that belonged to men who'd seen too much and survived anyway. He was her pilot, the one who'd flown that last mission, the one who'd lost his arm in the same RPG attack that shattered her leg. Sir, Sarah tried to stand, couldn't make her leg cooperate. I didn't know you were stationed here. Base commander as of 6 months ago. Webb walked closer, his movements carrying the slight asymmetry of someone who'd learned to balance with a prosthetic. And stay down, Lieutenant. You've earned the rest. He lowered himself to sit beside her with a grunt, his prosthetic arm resting on his knee. For a long moment, they sat in silence, 2 broken warriors watching the sun set over a battlefield that shouldn't exist on American soil. You saved my son today, Webb said finally. Sarah's head turned slowly. What? Lance Corporal James Chen, the 19-year-old with the hemothorax. Webb's voice was steady, but there was something fragile underneath. That's my boy, my son. He enlisted 8 months ago, didn't tell me until after he'd signed the papers. Said he wanted to serve like his old man. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. The young Marine she'd cracked open in a field tent, the one whose severed artery she'd repaired with her bare hands, that was Marcus Webb's son. I didn't know, Sarah whispered. When did you? How did you? Met his mother in Texas year after the crash. She helped me through rehab, through learning to live with this. He gestured to his prosthetic arm. We got married. I adopted her son. He took my name. Webb's voice cracked slightly. He wanted to be a Marine because I was a Marine, and today I almost lost him because of that. Sarah's throat tightened. Marcus. When Morrison radioed that Angel 6 was in the bird, I couldn't believe it. Webb turned to look at her, and his eyes were wet. 3 years, Sarah. 3 years of wondering where you went, why you disappeared. I called. I wrote. I tried to find you. I know, Sarah's voice was barely audible. I couldn't. I couldn't face you, couldn't face any of them. Because of the crash. It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I made a choice, Marcus. I chose to save 12 Marines I barely knew over 3 people who were my family. You lost your arm. David and Amanda lost their lives. And I walked away with a limp and nightmares. You walked away because you did your job, Webb said firmly. We all knew the risks, every single one of us. That doesn't make it easier, Sarah's voice broke. Every night I see their faces. I hear Amanda screaming at me to get them out. I feel David's hand on my shoulder right before impact. I remember making the decision to aim for solid ground instead of water, knowing that it would kill you all but save them. And you were right. Webb's prosthetic hand, surprisingly warm, sophisticated robotics, gripped her shoulder. 12 Marines went home to their families. 12 futures that exist because of your choice. My arm, that's a small price for 12 lives. David and Amanda, they were warriors. They understood the mission. They would have made the same choice. How can you say that? Sarah's voice was raw with pain. How can you forgive me? There's nothing to forgive. Webb's voice was gentle but absolute. Sarah, you didn't kill us. An RPG fired by a Taliban fighter killed us. You saved everyone you could with the time you had. That's not a sin. That's heroism. Sarah shook her head, unable to accept it. Listen to me. Webb shifted to face her fully. For 3 years I've watched you torture yourself. I know because I did the same thing. I woke up in that hospital missing my arm and I hated myself. Hated that I survived when my crew chief died. Hated that I couldn't save them. Hated that I was broken. How did you stop? Sarah asked desperately. I didn't stop hating myself, Webb admitted. But I learned to live with it, and I learned that honor isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up anyway. It's about doing the best you can with what you have left. He gestured toward the triage area. You showed up today. With a shattered leg and PTSD and 3 years of guilt, you showed up. And 16 Marines, including my son, are alive because of it. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving streaks of dried blood on her cheeks. It hurts, Marcus. Every day it hurts. I know. Webb's voice was infinitely sad and infinitely kind. It's supposed to hurt. That's how you know you're still human. The day it stops hurting is the day you should worry. They sat in silence as the stars began to emerge overhead. The sounds of the base settling into night routines drifted across the training range. Generators humming, vehicles moving, the distant voices of Marines securing the area. What do I do now? Sarah asked finally. I got fired from the hospital. I don't have a job. I don't know if I can go back to civilian life after this. Webb was quiet for a long moment. Then, I have a proposition for you. The Marines are establishing a new trauma training program, civilian-military partnership. We need someone to run it. Someone who can teach the next generation of combat medics and flight nurses. Someone who's lived it, survived it, and can pass that knowledge on. Sarah looked at him sharply. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a purpose. Webb met her gaze. It's civilian position, flexible hours. You work at your own pace. No deployments required. But you'd be training the people who will replace us. The people who will save the next generation. I don't know if I can. You just saved 16 critical casualties in field conditions with a shattered leg and 3 years of rust. Webb's voice was firm. You can do this. The question is, do you want to? Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, saw a text from an unknown number. Ma'am, this is LCPL Chen. They told me you saved my life. Thank you. I don't know what else to say except thank you. Below it, another text. This is Staff SGT Reynolds. Thank you for the morphine and the kindness, and for making me believe I can still serve. Another, Corpsman Jenkins here. You taught me more in 4 hours than I learned in 6 months of school. Thank you for showing us what excellence looks like. The messages kept coming. Marines she'd saved, corpsmen she'd taught, people whose lives she'd touched in ways she hadn't even realized. Sarah stared at her phone, tears streaming down her face. For 3 years she'd carried the weight of 3 deaths. Today she'd been reminded of 43 lives, 16 more added to that count, dozens of students who'd learned from her, hundreds of future patients who'd be saved because she taught their medics well. "Does it count?" Sarah whispered. "The ones we save, does it balance against the ones we lost?" Webb was quiet for a long moment. Then, "No, it doesn't balance, it never balances, but Sarah, it counts. It has to count. Because if it doesn't, then what the hell are we doing this for?" Sarah closed her eyes, felt the weight of the tactical vest on her shoulders, felt the pain in her leg, felt the exhaustion and the fear and the cost of being Angel 6. And underneath all of that, so faint she'd almost forgotten it existed, she felt something else. Purpose. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, I'll do it." Webb smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in 3 years. "Welcome back, Angel 6. In the distance, a helicopter's rotors began to spin up. Another medical evacuation, another mission, another chance to save lives. Sarah Mitchell sat in the dust of Quantico, broken and bleeding and traumatized. But no longer alone. And no longer running. 3 days later, Sarah Mitchell returned to St. Mary's Hospital. The drive from Quantico had been quiet. Gunnery Sergeant Morrison had insisted on providing transport, a courtesy vehicle driven by a young Marine corporal who treated Sarah like she was made of glass and legends. She tried to protest, but Morrison had been immovable. "Ma'am, you saved 16 lives. The least we can do is give you a ride home." Home? The word felt strange now. Was St. Mary's still home? Was the small apartment she rented in town still home? Or had home shifted somewhere else, somewhere between the sky and the chaos, where broken people did impossible things because someone had to? The hospital parking lot was quieter than usual for a Wednesday morning. Sarah had called ahead, arranged to collect her personal belongings during off hours. She didn't want the stares, the questions, the uncomfortable conversations. She just wanted to grab her things and leave. Her leg throbbed as she climbed out of the vehicle. The doctors at Quantico had x-rayed it, confirmed what she already knew: torn surgical repairs, strained ligaments, and enough inflammation to keep her in pain for weeks. They'd offered her medical leave, strong pain medications, physical therapy. She declined the medication. She needed to feel this, needed the pain to keep her grounded, to remind her she was still alive, still human. "Ma'am," the corporal was looking at something in the parking lot. "I think you should see this." Sarah turned and froze. 12 Marines stood in dress blues near the hospital entrance. Perfect formation, ribbons gleaming in the morning sun. At their center stood Gunnery Sergeant Morrison, his scarred face serious, and beside him, walking with a slight hitch from the chest tube still in place but very much alive, Lance Corporal James Chen. "What are they doing here?" Sarah breathed. The corporal smiled slightly. "Word travels fast in the Corps, ma'am. When they heard you were coming back to the hospital that fired you, well," he gestured. "Marines take care of their own, and you're one of us whether you wear the uniform or not." Sarah's throat tightened. She approached slowly, her limp pronounced after the 3-day ordeal. The Marines snapped to attention as one, their movement so crisp and synchronized it could have been choreographed. "At ease," Sarah said quietly. "You didn't have to." "Yes, ma'am, we did." Morrison stepped forward. In his hands was a wooden display case lined with velvet. Inside, arranged in perfect rows, were challenge coins, 12 of them, each one different: unit insignias, deployment commemorations, personal coins from commanding officers. "Every Marine you saved at Quantico wanted to give you something," Morrison explained. "But what do you give to someone who gave you your life back? So we decided on these. Challenge coins. In the Marine Corps, when you receive someone's coin, it means you've earned their respect, their gratitude, their brotherhood." One by one, the Marines stepped forward. Each presented their coin. Each told their story. "Ma'am, Lance Corporal Rodriguez, you repaired my femoral artery in the field. Doctors said I shouldn't have made it to the hospital." He placed his coin in the case. "Because of you, I'm walking." "Staff Sergeant Reynolds, ma'am, you treated my amputation with dignity when I felt like my career was over. You reminded me I'm still a Marine." His coin joined the others. "I'm getting fitted for a prosthetic next week, planning to stay in if they'll have me." "Corpsman Jenkins, ma'am, you taught me more about trauma medicine in 4 hours than I learned in 6 months of training." His young face was earnest. "I want to be like you. I want to be the medic who never gives up." On and on they went. 12 Marines, 12 stories, 12 lives that existed because Sarah Mitchell had refused to stay sidelined. When the last coin was placed, Morrison closed the case and handed it to her. "From all of us, ma'am, welcome to the Brotherhood." Sarah's hands shook as she accepted the case. The weight of it, not just the physical weight but the emotional weight of what it represented, threatened to break her. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." Lance Corporal James Chen stepped forward. He moved gingerly, one hand pressed to his chest where the surgical incision was still healing. "Ma'am, I'm Colonel Webb's son. My dad told me what happened 3 years ago, told me about the crash, about the choice you made." His voice was steady despite his youth. "I'm alive because you made choices like that, because you never quit, because you're Angel 6. He held out his hand. In his palm was a challenge coin Sarah recognized immediately, Colonel Webb's personal coin. "Base Commander, Quantico Marine Corps Base." "My dad wanted me to give you this," James said. "He also wanted me to tell you that your office is ready whenever you want to start." Sarah's breath caught. "Office?" "At Quantico, ma'am," Morrison smiled. "The new civilian military trauma training center. They've got a whole building set up. Classrooms, simulation labs, surgical suites for training. Colonel Webb wants you to run it. Train the next generation of combat medics, flight nurses, field surgeons." "I haven't agreed to." Sarah's phone rang. She fumbled it out of her pocket, saw the caller ID, Colonel MWEBB. "You should probably answer that, ma'am," Morrison said, his smile widening. Sarah swiped to accept. "Colonel." "Lieutenant Mitchell." Webb's voice was formal, commanding, the voice of a base commander, not a friend. "I'm calling to formally offer you the position of Director of Trauma Education at the Marine Corps Combat Medical Training Center, Quantico. Civilian position, GS-13 pay grade, full benefits, flexible schedule to accommodate your medical needs." He paused. "I'm also calling to say that if you turn this down, I'm going to personally fly to Virginia and drag you back here. We need you, Sarah. Those kids need you." Sarah closed her eyes. Behind her eyelids she saw faces. Amanda David, Marcus's younger self. The 3 who died so others could live. And then newer faces. James Chen, opening his eyes after she repaired his heart's artery. Staff Sergeant Reynolds thanking her through his pain. Corpsman Jenkins, watching her work with awe and determination to learn. The ones she'd lost, the ones she'd saved, the ones she could still save by teaching others. "Sarah," Webb's voice was gentler now, "you still there?" "I'm here," she whispered. "Then what's your answer?" Sarah opened her eyes, looked at the Marines standing before her in their dress blues, looked at the hospital entrance where she'd been told she wasn't good enough, looked at the challenge coins in the case, physical proof that she was more than her limitations. "My answer is yes, sir. When do I start?" "Monday work for you?" Sarah laughed, a real laugh, the first in 3 years that didn't feel forced. "Monday works perfectly, sir." "Outstanding. Welcome aboard, Director Mitchell." Webb paused. "And Sarah, thank you for everything, for saving my son, for coming back, for being you." The call ended. Sarah stood in the parking lot of St. Mary's Hospital, surrounded by Marines, holding a case full of challenge coins that represented 16 lives saved in the worst conditions imaginable. The hospital doors opened. Dr. Richard Chen emerged, saw the gathering, and froze. For a long moment, he and Sarah stared at each other across the parking lot. Then Chen walked toward them. His face was complicated, shame, regret, something that might have been respect. "Sarah," his voice was quiet, "I owe you an apology." "Yes, you do." Sarah's voice was steady. "But I don't need it. I needed it 3 days ago when you told me to step aside, when you decided my limp made me worthless." She gestured at the Marines around her. "But these men taught me something. They taught me that worth isn't measured by how fast you walk or how perfect your body is. It's measured by what you do when everything is falling apart." Chen flinched. "I was wrong about everything. I let my ego and my prejudice blind me to who you really are." He glanced at James Chen, recognition flickering across his face, family resemblance. "My nephew is alive because of you, because you didn't let my words stop you." "No, sir. He's alive because 12 Marines flew 90 miles to find Angel 6, because they believed in someone you couldn't see." Sarah shifted the case of coins in her arms. "I came to get my things. Then I'm leaving. I have a new job, a better job, one where my limp doesn't matter." "Sarah, wait." Chen pulled an envelope from his pocket. "This is your official termination letter. I was going to mail it, but—" He tore it in half. "I'm not sending it. You're not fired. You're on indefinite leave. If you ever want to come back." "I won't." Sarah's voice was kind but final. "This place was never home. I was just hiding here, hiding from who I really am, but I'm done hiding." She turned to the Marines. "Gentlemen, shall we?" They escorted her into the hospital, 12 Marines in dress blues surrounding one limping nurse who'd saved their lives. Hospital staff stopped and stared. Whispers followed them. By the time Sarah reached her locker, a crowd had gathered. She packed quickly. Personal items, a few books, the photo of her old crew she'd kept hidden. When she closed the locker for the last time, she felt lighter somehow. As they left the hospital, Sarah paused at the ER entrance. Looked back one last time at the place where she tried to be ordinary, tried to be invisible, tried to forget. "No regrets, ma'am?" Morrison asked. Sarah touched the tactical vest folded in her bag, the one with Angel 6 embroidered on it. "Not anymore, Gunny. Not anymore." 6 months later. The classroom at Quantico's Combat Medical Training Center was packed with eager faces. 23 students, Navy corpsmen, Army medics, Air Force pararescue, and civilian trauma nurses. All of them young, bright-eyed, ready to learn. At the front of the room stood Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, Director of Trauma Education. Her hair was more gray than brown now. Her limp was still prominent. Her hands still shook sometimes when the memories got too loud. But when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who'd lived what she taught. "I'm Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell," she began. "Some of you might know my call sign, Angel 6. Some of you might have heard the stories. Let me tell you right now, most of them are exaggerated. I'm not a superhero. I'm not perfect. I'm a broken woman with a bad leg, PTSD, and more scars than I can count." She paused, let that sink in. "But I'm also someone who saved more combat casualties than almost anyone alive. Not because I'm special, but because I showed up, because I trained hard, because I learned from my failures and never stopped trying to be better." She gestured at her leg. "This limp, it's from an RPG that should have killed me. These scars, they're from fires I shouldn't have survived, but I'm still here. And now I'm going to teach you how to be here too. How to save lives when everything is falling apart. How to make impossible decisions. How to live with the cost of those decisions." She smiled, a tired, genuine smile. "Welcome to combat trauma medicine. Welcome to the hardest job you'll ever love. Welcome to becoming angels." In the back row, Lance Corporal James Chen, now recovered and returned to duty, smiled and nodded. Outside, visible through the classroom windows, 4 Marine helicopters sat on the tarmac. And painted on the side of the lead bird, in fresh white letters, Angel 6 Training Division. Sarah Mitchell had come home. Not to a place, to a purpose. And in finding that purpose, she'd finally found peace.